5 forbidden truths about women that most men never learn. According to Machiavelli, you've been taught that understanding women is about romance, about being the perfect gentleman, about endless validation and emotional availability. But as you sit there, replaying every failed interaction, every moment of confusion, every time you gave everything and received indifference in return, a darker truth emerges. The comfortable narratives you've clung to, that kindness conquers all, that transparency builds trust, that loyalty guarantees reciprocation, are the very chains that bind you to mediocrity. Tonight, we strip away the illusions and confront what Machiavelli knew centuries ago about the nature of attraction, power, and human psychology. The silence in your room echoes with the weight of failed attempts. How many times have you analyzed the same conversations, searching for the moment it all went wrong? How many times have you convinced yourself that if you just tried harder, gave more, opened your heart wider, the outcome would be different? But here you are, exhausted by your own generosity, drained by your own transparency, confused by your own loyalty. The world has sold you a fairy tale dressed as wisdom, and you've been living it like gospel. Every relationship advice column, every romantic comedy, every well-meaning friend has fed you the same poison. Be yourself, be kind, be available, be understanding. And you've swallowed it whole, believing that goodness alone would be enough. But goodness without strategy is weakness. Kindness without boundaries is exploitation. Availability without mystery is invisibility. You've been playing a game where you didn't know the rules, competing in an arena where everyone else understood the real dynamics, while you clung to the sanitized version they wanted you to believe. The truth cuts deeper than rejection. It's not that you're not good enough. It's that you've been trying to be good in a world that respects strength, trying to be pure in a reality that rewards complexity, trying to be simple in a universe that thrives on mystery. Machiavelli understood what modern society has forgotten. Human nature operates on levels far more complex than our conscious minds admit. The very qualities you've been told to cultivate are the ones that guarantee your invisibility. Your dedication becomes dependence. Your honesty becomes predictability. Your loyalty becomes weakness. You've been told that understanding women is about romance, about being the perfect gentleman, about endless validation and emotional availability. But as you sit there in the quiet aftermath of another failed connection, you begin to realize that everything you've been taught about attraction, about relationships, about human nature itself, has been a carefully constructed lie designed to keep you docile, manageable, and ultimately powerless. The comfortable narratives you've clung to, that kindness conquers all, that transparency builds trust, that loyalty guarantees reciprocation, are the very chains that bind you to mediocrity, while others who understand the real game move through life with confidence, purpose, and genuine power. The men who succeed in love aren't the ones who follow the rules you've been given. They're the ones who understand that beneath the surface of conscious desires lies a deeper, more primitive psychology that responds to entirely different signals. They know that attraction isn't logical, that desire isn't fair, that connection isn't built on the foundation of niceness but on the bedrock of respect, mystery, and controlled emotional distance. They understand what Machiavelli knew centuries ago, that human beings are complex creatures driven by forces they don't fully understand, and that power, real power, comes from understanding these forces rather than pretending they don't exist. Tonight, everything changes. Tonight, you stop being the victim of your own good intentions and start becoming the architect of your own destiny. Tonight, you learn the forbidden truths that will transform not just how you approach relationships, but how you move through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who finally understands the game. You've been taught that honesty is the foundation of connection, that laying your soul bare creates intimacy. Yet every time you've opened yourself completely, shared every thought, every insecurity, every dream, You've watched interest fade like smoke in the wind. The more you revealed, the less intrigued they became. The more vulnerable you made yourself, the more distant they grew. And in your confusion, you doubled down, believing that even more transparency would somehow reverse the tide. But Machiavelli understood what you're only now beginning to grasp, that power lies not in what you reveal, but in what you conceal. The human psyche is drawn to the unknown, the unconquered, the mysterious. When you become an open book, you cease to be a puzzle worth solving. When you eliminate all mystery from your presence, you eliminate the very tension that creates attraction. Think about every person who has ever captivated you completely. Were they the ones who told you everything about themselves on the first encounter? Were they the ones who laid out their entire life story, their fears, their dreams, their insecurities in perfect detail? Or were they the ones who revealed themselves in layers, who maintained an aura of depth that you couldn't quite penetrate, who left you wondering what they were thinking, what they were feeling, what they might do next? The most magnetic individuals throughout history have mastered the art of strategic revelation. They understand that the human mind craves what it cannot fully possess, desires what it cannot completely understand, and pursues what it cannot easily predict. They give glimpses of their depth while maintaining an aura of enigma that keeps others perpetually intrigued and invested in discovering more. You've been operating under the assumption that transparency equals trust, that sharing everything means caring deeply. But transparency without mystery is like a book with no chapters left to read. Once someone has absorbed all there is to know about you, the excitement of discovery dies. The anticipation of what might be revealed next disappears. The investment in understanding you evaporates because there's nothing left to understand. This isn't about deception or manipulation. This is about understanding that human attraction operates on psychological principles that have nothing to do with fairness or logic. When you maintain some mystery about yourself, when you reveal your depths gradually and strategically, when you allow others to work for the privilege of truly knowing you, you create a dynamic that sustains interest and builds genuine investment. The person who shares everything immediately teaches others that access to their inner world is cheap, that their thoughts and feelings can be obtained without effort, that their vulnerability is a commodity freely given rather than a treasure carefully earned. But the person who reveals themselves thoughtfully, who maintains some inner sanctum that must be approached with respect and patience, creates a sense of value that others naturally want to pursue. Your instinct tells you that constant availability proves your worth, that being always present demonstrates your commitment. But observe the pattern in your own life. The more accessible you become, the less valued you are. The more predictably available you make yourself, the less effort others invest in securing your time and attention. You've confused availability with value, presence with importance, accessibility with desirability. Machiavelli wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Your constant presence becomes invisible, taken for granted, reduced to background noise in the emotional landscape of others. When you're always there, always responding, always available at a moment's notice, you teach others that your time has no value, that your attention is unlimited, that your presence is guaranteed regardless of how they treat you. But strategic absence creates a vacuum that the mind cannot help but fill with thoughts of you. When you're not immediately available, when your time becomes something that must be earned rather than assumed, when your presence becomes a privilege rather than a given, you force others to confront the possibility of losing something they've grown accustomed to having. This isn't about playing games or being artificially unavailable. This is about understanding that scarcity creates value, that the things we can always have are the things we least appreciate, and that your time and attention are finite resources that should be allocated thoughtfully rather than distributed carelessly. Consider how you respond to the people in your own life. Do you value most the ones who are always at your beck and call, who drop everything the moment you reach out? who structure their lives around your availability? Or do you find yourself more intrigued by those who have their own lives, their own priorities, their own boundaries around their time and energy? The truth is uncomfortable but undeniable. Constant availability signals low value. When someone knows they can reach you anytime, anywhere, for any reason, your accessibility becomes ordinary. But when your availability is limited, when your time must be requested rather than assumed, when your presence is something to be earned through respect and genuine interest, that same accessibility becomes precious. Strategic absence doesn't mean being cold or unresponsive. It means understanding that your presence has power precisely because it's not guaranteed. It means recognizing that absence can create more emotional impact than presence, that wondering where you are can be more compelling than knowing exactly where to find you, that the possibility of not being able to reach you can create more desire than the certainty of always being able to connect. When you withdraw your attention strategically, when you become unpredictable in your availability, when you demonstrate that your time is valuable and your presence is earned, you create a dynamic where others must invest effort to secure what they want from you. And human nature dictates that we value most what we must work to obtain. You've been conditioned to believe that emotional investment signals maturity, that wearing your heart on your sleeve shows authenticity, that reacting strongly to every situation demonstrates how much you care. Yet the more emotionally reactive you become, the less seriously you're taken. The more your emotions fluctuate based on external circumstances, the less stable and reliable you appear to others. Machiavelli observed that everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. Those who command respect understand this distinction. They feel deeply but respond strategically. They experience the full range of human emotion, but maintain sovereignty over how and when those emotions are expressed. When you react to every slight, celebrate every small victory, or crumble at every setback, you reveal that your emotional state is controlled by external forces. You demonstrate that your inner world is subject to the whims of circumstance, that your peace can be disrupted by anyone with the desire to do so, that your happiness depends on factors beyond your control. But true power lies in maintaining emotional equilibrium regardless of circumstances. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or uncaring. It means developing the capacity to feel without being overwhelmed, to care without being consumed, to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Watch how others respond to you when you maintain emotional stability in the face of chaos. Notice how your calm becomes an anchor for others, how your unshakable demeanor creates a sense of security and strength that others naturally want to be around. Observe how your ability to remain centered while others lose their composure makes you appear wise, mature, and dependable. Emotional detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring so deeply that you refuse to let your emotions be weaponized against you. It's about understanding that your inner state is your responsibility, that your peace is your sanctuary, that your emotional sovereignty is your greatest asset. The person who can maintain composure under pressure, who can think clearly in emotional situations, who can respond rather than react, possesses a form of power that others instinctively recognize and respect. They become the person others turn to in crisis, the one whose opinion carries weight, the one whose presence brings stability to uncertain situations. This emotional mastery doesn't happen overnight. It requires conscious practice, deliberate cultivation, and the willingness to observe your own emotional patterns without judgment. It means developing the gap between stimulus and response, creating space between what happens to you and how you choose to handle it. Never allowing others to dictate your emotional climate means taking full responsibility for your inner world. It means recognizing that while you cannot control what others do, you have complete authority over how you respond. It means understanding that your emotional state is too important to be left at the mercy of other people's actions, moods, or decisions. Society has programmed you to believe that accommodation and agreeability create harmony, that saying yes to everything demonstrates your value as a partner, that removing all friction from relationships shows how much you care. But observe the pattern in your own experiences. The more accommodating you become, the less respect you receive. The more you agree to things that don't serve you, the more others expect you to continue doing so. Machiavelli noted that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that the deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. When you remove all challenge from your interactions, when you eliminate any possibility of conflict or disagreement, when you make yourself endlessly flexible and accommodating, you remove the very elements that create growth, investment, and respect. The human spirit is designed to overcome obstacles. When none exist, it creates them or seeks them elsewhere. When you make everything easy for someone, when you eliminate all resistance from their path, when you accommodate their every desire without question, you rob them of the satisfaction that comes from earning what they want. Think about the relationships and achievements in your own life that brought you the most satisfaction. Were they the ones that came easily, that required no effort, that were handed to you without struggle? Or were they the ones you had to work for, that challenged you, that demanded your best effort and refused to accept anything less? Those who inspire deep devotion understand that love without challenge becomes complacency, that relationships without friction become stagnant, that respect without boundaries becomes contempt. They know that saying no sometimes makes their yes more valuable, that having standards makes their acceptance more meaningful, that being willing to walk away makes their presence more appreciated. This doesn't mean being difficult for the sake of being difficult or creating unnecessary conflict. It means understanding that healthy relationships require healthy tension, that growth happens through challenge, that respect is earned through boundaries rather than given through accommodation. When you stand for something, when you have non-negotiable values, when you're willing to disagree and potentially lose someone rather than compromise your integrity, you create a dynamic where others must rise to meet your standards. You demonstrate that access to you and your energy requires a certain level of respect, effort, and alignment. The person who challenges others to be better, who refuses to accept mediocrity, who maintains standards even when it's uncomfortable, creates relationships built on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. They inspire others to grow, to improve, to become worthy of the connection they're seeking. But challenge must be balanced with reward. It's not about being perpetually difficult or impossible to please. It's about understanding that the most meaningful connections are forged through mutual growth, that the strongest bonds are created when both parties must continually earn each other's respect, that the deepest love exists when both people know they're with someone who chooses them daily, rather than someone who simply accepts them by default. You've been taught that love should be pure, unconditional, free from any element of concern or apprehension. You've been told that healthy relationships exist in a space of complete safety, where no one fears loss, where commitment is absolute, where love flows freely without boundaries or consequences. But this sanitized version of love has left you powerless, taken for granted, and ultimately alone. Machiavelli's most profound insight reveals why pure love without consequence becomes powerless. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. This doesn't mean ruling through terror or emotional manipulation. It means understanding that respect requires the knowledge that actions have consequences, that relationships have boundaries, that love itself has limits. When someone knows they can treat you poorly without repercussions, when they understand that your love comes with no boundaries, no standards, no potential for loss, that love becomes worthless. Not because love itself is worthless, but because anything freely given without the possibility of being withdrawn loses its value in the human psyche. The most enduring connections combine genuine affection with mutual respect born from understanding that the relationship is valuable precisely because it can be lost. This creates a dynamic where both parties invest in maintaining what they have, where both people work to be worthy of what they've been given, where both individuals understand that love is not a guarantee but a gift that must be honored. Fear in this context isn't the fear of physical harm or emotional abuse. It's the healthy apprehension that comes from knowing you're with someone who values themselves enough to leave if treated poorly, who has standards that must be met, who offers love as a choice rather than a compulsion. When you remove all possibility of loss from a relationship, you remove all incentive for the other person to invest in maintaining it. When you make your love unconditional in the truest sense, when you eliminate any consequences for poor treatment, when you accept anything and everything in the name of love, you teach others that your love is cheap, that your presence is guaranteed, regardless of their behavior, that your feelings are irrelevant to their choices. But when someone knows that your love is precious precisely because it can be withdrawn, when they understand that your presence is a privilege that must be earned and maintained, when they recognize that treating you poorly will result in the loss of something valuable, they naturally invest more in the relationship. This isn't about threatening to leave or using fear as a weapon. It's about understanding that healthy love includes healthy consequences, that respect requires the possibility of loss, that the most secure relationships are built on the foundation of mutual choice rather than mutual dependence. Both parties in a truly healthy relationship know they're there because they want to be, not because they have to be. They understand that their partner chooses them daily from a position of strength, not from a position of need. They recognize that the love they share is valuable precisely because it's freely given by someone who could choose differently. Every romantic failure has taught you something about human nature that you've refused to accept. Every moment of confusion, every unexpected rejection, every time someone chose someone else over you despite your obvious dedication, has revealed truths about attraction and desire that contradict everything you've been told about how relationships work. The gap between what people say they want and what actually ignites their interest reveals the fundamental disconnect between conscious desires and unconscious drives. How many times have you heard someone describe their ideal partner as kind, stable, reliable, and emotionally available, only to watch them choose someone who embodies none of these qualities? Machiavelli understood that human behavior operates on multiple levels simultaneously: the stated, the hidden, and the unconscious. What people think they want, what they claim they want, and what they actually respond to are often three completely different things. And the unconscious level, the one that drives actual behavior, is the one that operates according to evolutionary psychology, primal instincts, and ancient patterns of attraction. When someone claims to want stability but gravitates toward chaos, when they say they value honesty but are drawn to mystery, when they insist they want kindness but respond more powerfully to strength, you're witnessing the eternal conflict between social conditioning and primal psychology. The conscious mind has been trained by society to value certain qualities: kindness, stability, predictability, emotional availability. But the unconscious mind, the one that actually generates feelings of attraction and desire, operates according to much older programming. It responds to signals of strength, confidence, unpredictability, and emotional independence. This is why the nice guy finishes last. Not because kindness is bad, but because kindness without strength is weakness. Not because stability is wrong, but because predictability without mystery is boring. Not because emotional availability is negative, but because constant emotional availability without boundaries is neediness. Mastering this understanding means recognizing that attraction operates below the level of conscious choice, responding to ancient patterns of behavior that signal genetic fitness, resource acquisition ability, and emotional strength. It means understanding that what turns someone on emotionally and physically often has nothing to do with what they think should turn them on intellectually. The person who can navigate both levels of human psychology, who can be kind without being weak, stable without being predictable, emotionally available without being needy, possesses a profound advantage in all human relationships. They understand that surface-level compatibility is not enough, that intellectual connection without emotional and physical attraction is friendship, not romance. This doesn't mean abandoning your values or becoming someone you're not. It means understanding that the most attractive version of yourself is the one that embodies your positive qualities from a position of strength rather than weakness, from a place of choice rather than need, from a foundation of self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. Your kindness has been weaponized against you, transformed from a strength into a vulnerability that others exploit without conscience. You've spent years believing that your generous nature, your willingness to help, your desire to make others happy were your greatest assets. But you've confused being nice with being good, accommodation with virtue, enabling with love. The truth is uncomfortable but necessary. Your unconditional kindness has become a signal to others that you have no boundaries, no self-respect, no understanding of your own value. It attracts those who seek to take without giving, who interpret your generosity as weakness, who see your forgiveness as permission to repeat harmful behaviors. Machiavelli warned that a man who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. You've been so focused on what ought to be true about kindness and goodness that you've ignored what is actually true about human nature and relationship dynamics. Your endless patience with those who don't deserve it has taught them that they can treat you poorly without consequences. Your willingness to give without receiving has shown them that you don't value yourself enough to demand reciprocity. Your quick forgiveness of repeated offenses has demonstrated that you care more about maintaining peace than maintaining respect. True kindness requires wisdom. It means knowing when to give and when to withhold, when to help and when to allow natural consequences to teach necessary lessons. It means understanding that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their destructive behavior by withdrawing your support. Kindness without discernment becomes enablement. When you help someone avoid the consequences of their actions, when you rescue them from problems they created, when you provide support without requiring change, you're not being kind, you're being codependent. The most genuinely kind people in history were also the strongest. They helped from a position of strength, not weakness. They gave from abundance, not scarcity. They offered support while maintaining boundaries, assistance while requiring accountability, love while demanding respect. Your kindness becomes powerful when it's paired with wisdom, when it's offered strategically rather than indiscriminately, when it's given as a gift rather than extracted as a compulsion. The person who can be kind without being a pushover, generous without being taken advantage of, helpful without being used, possesses a rare combination of strength and compassion that others naturally respect and admire. This doesn't mean becoming cold or calculating. It means becoming discerning. It means understanding that your kindness is valuable precisely because it's yours to give or withhold. It means recognizing that the most loving thing you can do sometimes is to say no, to set boundaries, to allow others to experience the consequences of their choices. The moment has arrived to shed the identity that has served others at your expense. You've been so focused on being what others wanted that you've forgotten who you actually are beneath the layers of accommodation and people-pleasing. You've spent so much energy trying to fit into roles that others assigned you that you've lost touch with your authentic self. Machiavelli emphasized that he who abandons what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. You've been abandoning your own needs, your own values, your own instincts for what you thought relationships ought to be, for what you believed others ought to appreciate, for what you hoped would be enough to earn love and respect. But your authentic self, the one with opinions, boundaries, standards, and non-negotiable values, has been buried under years of conditioning that taught you to prioritize harmony over truth, acceptance over respect, being liked over being valued. The real you, the one who existed before the world convinced you to betray your own interests, is still there, waiting to be reclaimed. Reclaiming sovereignty means accepting that not everyone will appreciate the real you. It means understanding that some relationships will end when you stop playing the roles they assigned you, that some people will resist your transformation, that some connections were built on your willingness to diminish yourself for their comfort. This isn't about becoming cold or manipulative. It's about becoming whole. It's about integrating the parts of yourself that you've been taught to hide, suppress, or modify for the sake of others. It's about honoring your own needs, desires, and boundaries with the same respect you've given to everyone else's. The process of reclaiming your sovereign self requires courage because it means disappointing people who have grown comfortable with your self-sacrifice. It means setting boundaries with those who have benefited from your lack of boundaries. It means saying no to those who have grown accustomed to your automatic yes. But the alternative is to continue living as a shadow of yourself, to keep betraying your own nature for the temporary comfort of others, to remain trapped in relationships and situations that require you to be less than you are in order to be accepted. Your sovereign self doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It doesn't need to earn love through self-sacrifice or gain respect through accommodation. It operates from a place of inner fullness rather than outer validation, from a foundation of self-respect rather than self-abandonment. This transformation isn't about rejecting connection or becoming isolated. It's about creating space for relationships that honor who you actually are rather than who you think you need to be. It's about attracting people who appreciate your strength rather than exploit your weakness, who value your boundaries rather than test them, who respect your standards rather than try to lower them. Everything changes now. The knowledge you've gained becomes worthless unless translated into behavioral transformation. Understanding these truths intellectually is only the beginning. The real work lies in integrating them into your daily life, your interactions, your decisions, and your relationships. You begin by auditing every current relationship through this new lens. You examine the patterns that have kept you trapped in cycles of giving without receiving, of emotional investment without reciprocation, of availability without appreciation. You look at where you've been too accommodating, too available, too emotionally reactive, too unconditionally kind. Machiavelli taught that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. You must develop both cunning and courage, the strategic thinking to navigate complex social dynamics, and the strength to enforce your boundaries. This transformation requires you to become comfortable with discomfort. You must learn to sit with the anxiety that comes from not immediately responding to every text, not accommodating every request, not smoothing over every moment of tension. You must develop the capacity to disappoint others in order to honor yourself. The strategic thinking of the fox means learning to read between the lines, to understand what people are really asking for versus what they're saying, to recognize manipulation tactics to see through emotional manipulation and guilt trips. It means developing the ability to think several moves ahead, to consider the long-term consequences of your choices, to understand how your actions today will affect your position tomorrow. The courage of the lion means being willing to stand up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable, to enforce your boundaries even when others resist, to walk away from situations that don't serve you even when it feels scary. It means developing the inner strength to value your own respect more than others' approval, your own peace more than others' comfort. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you were before the world convinced you to betray your own interests for the comfort of others. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that you've been taught to suppress, ignore, or sacrifice for the sake of maintaining relationships that required you to be less than you are. The new you operates from a place of choice rather than compulsion, from a foundation of self-respect rather than self-sacrifice, from a position of strength rather than weakness. You help others because you want to, not because you feel guilty if you don't. You give because you choose to, not because you're afraid of what will happen if you stop. Watch how the world responds differently when you operate from this new understanding. The change is immediate and undeniable. Your conversations carry more weight because your words are no longer desperate attempts to gain approval, but considered expressions of genuine thought. People listen more carefully when you speak because you're no longer filling silence with nervous chatter, but offering value from a place of inner abundance. Your presence commands attention because you're no longer seeking validation, but offering something authentic and substantial. You're no longer the person who needs others to complete you, but someone who brings completeness to interactions. The energy you emit is no longer one of need, but one of choice, not one of scarcity, but one of abundance. Your relationships deepen because they're built on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. The people who remain in your life are there because they genuinely appreciate who you are, not because they can manipulate you into being who they want you to be. The connections you form are based on genuine compatibility rather than your willingness to compromise your nature. Those who truly appreciated you before will respect this evolution. They'll recognize that you're becoming more yourself, not less. They'll understand that your boundaries make you more valuable, not less accessible. They'll see that your newfound self-respect enhances rather than diminishes your capacity for genuine connection. But those who benefited from your previous weakness will resist or disappear entirely. They'll try to guilt you back into your old patterns, to convince you that your transformation is selfishness, to make you feel bad for no longer accepting treatment that you should never have tolerated in the first place. And their departure will be a gift, a clearing of space for relationships that honor who you actually are. Machiavelli observed that it is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. You are no longer defined by the roles others assigned you, the perpetual helper, the emotional caretaker, the one who always says yes, but by the standards you set for yourself. You honor your own life by living it according to your values, rather than others' expectations. The dating landscape transforms when you're no longer participating from scarcity, but from choice. You're not seeking someone to complete you because you're already complete. You're not looking for someone to validate you because you validate yourself. You're not desperate for connection because you're connected to yourself. This shift changes everything about how you show up in romantic interactions. You become attractive not because you're trying to be, but because you're being authentically yourself. You draw others in not through desperate attempts to please, but through the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth. You create connections not by accommodating others' every need, but by being someone worth accommodating. This is the birth of authentic personal power, not power over others, but power over yourself and your responses to the world, not the ability to control others, but the ability to control how you show up in every situation, not the capacity to make others do what you want, but the strength to ensure that what you accept aligns with what you deserve. You no longer need others to behave differently for you to feel good about yourself. You no longer require external validation to know your worth. You no longer depend on others' approval to feel confident in your choices. This independence becomes magnetic because it's so rare in a world full of people who need others to regulate their emotions, validate their decisions, and confirm their value. The person you're becoming is someone who can stand alone without loneliness, who can be in relationships without losing themselves, who can love deeply without becoming dependent. You offer partnership between two complete individuals rather than seeking completion through another person. This is what genuine connection looks like. Not two halves trying to become whole, but two whole people choosing to share their completeness with each other. Description: the truth you've been avoiding is destroying your soul from within 5 forbidden truths about women that most men never learn. According to Machiavelli, you've been living a lie that's slowly eroding your masculine essence. Every failed connection, every moment of confusion, every time you gave everything and received indifference in return has been teaching you something profound about human nature that you've refused to accept. This isn't just another dating advice video. This is a complete psychological reconstruction of how you understand attraction, power, and your own worth as a man. Through Machiavellian philosophy and deep psychological analysis, we explore the forbidden truths about mystery over transparency, strategic absence over constant availability, and emotional sovereignty over reactive neediness. This journey will strip away the comfortable illusions you've clung to and reveal the darker, more complex realities of human desire and connection. What you'll discover: why transparency destroys attraction and mystery creates magnetic pull. How constant availability signals low value and strategic absence builds desire. The psychology behind emotional detachment and why it commands respect. Why challenge breeds deeper devotion than accommodation ever could. How fear and love must coexist for genuine connection to flourish. The art of reclaiming your sovereign masculine identity. Why your kindness has been weaponized against you. The transformation from emotional dependency to inner power, like this video, if you're ready to stop being used and finally understand the game. Share it with someone who needs to hear these truths. Subscribe for more forbidden knowledge that will set you free. Tags forbidden, truths about women, Machiavelli dating advice, psychology of attraction, relationship red pills, emotional manipulation tactics, strategic dating tips, masculine psychology, understanding female psychology, relationship power dynamics, dating mistakes men make, why nice guys finish last, attraction psychology secrets, Machiavelli philosophy dating, relationship boundaries, emotional intelligence dating, male self-improvement, dating confidence tips, psychology of desire, relationship, strategy guide, feminine psychology explained, dating mindset shift, attraction triggers psychology, relationship emotional control, masculine energy dating, psychological dating tactics, understanding women's psychology, relationship power balance, dating self-respect, emotional unavailability strategy, psychological attraction principles. Images: a man sits alone in his room, the silence heavy with the weight of failed conversations replaying endlessly in his mind. Shadows of broken promises dance across the walls as he realizes his kindness has become his prison. The comfortable narratives he once clung to crumble like ancient parchment in his trembling hands. He stares at his reflection, seeing a stranger who gave everything and received indifference in return. The fairy tale wisdom he swallowed like gospel now tastes bitter as poison on his tongue. His transparency becomes a glass house where others can see everything but choose to look away. The game board reveals itself for the first time, showing him he's been playing with invisible pieces. Goodness without strategy transforms into weakness before his awakening eyes. His dedication morphs into dependence, chains forged from his own noble intentions. The comfortable lies designed to keep him docile finally shatter in the quiet aftermath. He watches interest fade like smoke every time he opens his soul completely. Mystery becomes his new armor, as he learns the power of what remains concealed. The human mind craves what it cannot fully possess, and he finally understands the hunger. His constant availability transforms from virtue to invisibility in others' eyes. Strategic absence creates a vacuum that minds cannot help but fill with thoughts of him. The scarcity of his presence becomes more precious than gold in others' perception. His emotional reactions become weapons others use to control his inner world. True power emerges as he maintains equilibrium while storms rage around him. The fox learns to recognize traps while the lion learns to frighten wolves. Discomfort becomes his teacher as he learns to sit with unanswered texts and unaccommodated requests. He develops the courage to disappoint others in order to honor himself. Strategic thinking allows him to read between the lines of every interaction. The strength to walk away from comfortable destruction grows within his chest. He reclaims the parts of himself the world convinced him to sacrifice. His words carry new weight because they're no longer desperate attempts for approval. Conversations deepen as people lean in to hear his considered expressions of genuine thought. His presence commands attention because he no longer seeks validation, but offers value. The energy he emits shifts from scarcity to abundance, from need to choice. Relationships transform as mutual respect replaces one-sided accommodation. Those who benefited from his weakness resist or disappear like shadows at dawn. The perpetual helper, emotional caretaker role falls away like an old costume. He honors his own life by living according to his values rather than others' expectations. The dating landscape transforms when he participates from choice rather than desperation. Authentic personal power births itself in the quiet confidence of self-knowledge. He becomes magnetic, not through trying, but through being authentically himself. Two complete individuals choose to share their wholeness rather than seek completion. His emotional independence becomes rare and precious in a world of dependent souls. The architecture of his destiny begins construction on the foundation of self-respect. Boundaries become bridges to better relationships rather than walls of isolation. His time transforms from worthless commodity to precious currency others must earn. The psychology of attraction reveals itself as he understands the game's true rules. Strategic revelation becomes his art as he learns to give glimpses while maintaining enigma. His inner sanctum becomes a treasure that must be approached with respect and patience. The vacuum of his absence draws others in more powerfully than constant presence ever could. Emotional sovereignty replaces reactive dependency as his new operating system. The lion's courage and fox's cunning merge within him as complementary strengths. His evolution from weakness to strength creates space for relationships that honor his truth. The magnetic pull of self-completion draws others who appreciate rather than manipulate. Partnership between equals replaces the desperate search for someone to make him whole. He stands alone without loneliness, complete within himself, yet open to genuine connection.